Happy engineers, welcome back. So glad to be with you. You're in for a real treat today with my dear friend Myra Nawabi, who's here with an incredible vision, an incredible passion, and some really powerful things to share from her heart today. Myra, I can't thank you enough for making time to be here with me and the Happy Engineer audience out there. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
We met, man, maybe even a year ago. And one of the things that just struck me about you from the first moment we talked is how much passion and vision you have for making an impact, not just in engineering and in aviation and aerospace and the industries that you support from a technology and leadership perspective, but the people and the human aspects of being an engineer and how you want to drive change into the world through your life and your story. And I was so struck by that. And I'm really excited for you to unpack some of that with us today. And maybe to start and take us to a moment that sets the stage for part of why this is such an amazing thing is to see how far you've already come. And before we started recording today, you shared with me, a moment during your college years that really stands out as a turning point and a learning point for you. Myra, can you just share with us what was it that was going on there in your heart and mind your fourth year of college?
So I was enrolled at Arizona State University in their aeronautical engineering program. And I was one of two females in the entire school that was getting this degree. And what had happened is I was assigned to a group project, and the gentleman that I was working with had stolen a copy of the answers from the TA. Now, they knew that if they had told me about it, that I would have tattled the professor. So they secretly met and did the work and copied all the information. And even though I did my part and I submitted it to them separately, because there was typos that was in the book that they had copied, I was accused of plagiarizing along with them. And so I was facing expulsion from the university. And obviously, I had to actually demonstrate to the university that I was not part of it. And thankfully, one of the guys finally fessed up and said, she's right, she did not participate in this. But at that point, here I am in my fourth year, my first semester of my fourth year. I'm so close to the finish line. I have 2 semesters left. I decided that it was too hard to become an engineer, and I dropped out of aeronautical engineering and then decided to become a teacher instead, which is, this is what I was always told at home. Maybe you want to be a teacher or a nurse. Maybe engineering is too hard and it's not better suited for females. And so think about that as a career. Don't think about this as a career.
Wow. So you're in your fourth year of engineering school, and everyone listening knows like you've already gone through most of the hardest parts by that stage. And then this really unbelievably unfair and tragic thing happens. Myra, tell us what was going on during that time. What was that like to be facing expulsion when you knew you hadn't done anything wrong?
I felt like I was in this pressure cooker, and then somebody had just really turned on the heat all the way high. And I think it was like that, when the pressure cooker gets too hot and it explodes. And I think it was that moment for me. I just thought, this is too hard. I have no support system at home. When I go home and I like, my family never really understood, even though there were male engineers in the family, like 2 of my uncles were mechanical engineers. But the idea was like, wow, you could be an engineer like them, just never. And even today, I'm still the only female engineer in the family. And the family says it like, I don't know why you did that. Like, I don't know why you chose to go that path. And what would have been really great is if I had a support system, because at that point, I really started believing the conversation that was happening around me, which was, I just was not cut out for engineering.
Started to believe the conversation happening around you. That's such a important statement. How many different voices there were in your world saying, what are you doing? Why are you going down this really hard road when you could do something else? Whatever that belief system was, be a teacher, etc. So Myra, tell us, why did you want to be an engineer in the first place?
Well, at the age of 6, I fell in love with the night sky. To me, I would look at the stars every night and I would wonder what else was out there. I wondered if there was another little girl living in the moon, and what did she wear? What did she eat? Did she have parents? You know, and I would ask people what's on the moon, and they would say, oh, well, a bunch of rocks. And I didn't accept that. And the 6-year-old that I was, I believed that maybe there was these humans, that not humans, but entities in other planets that were invisible, and they were just not showing themselves to these humans that they couldn't trust. So if I went there, then they would show themselves to me.
I
Of course,
love
I'm a
that.
6-year-old. What do I know, right? But that's where my love for aerospace came, is that as a child, I just loved the night sky. I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to explore it. I wanted to go to outer space and see for myself all the different stars out there. I wanted to see the Earth from outer space. So that's where this love of engineering came for me.
When you look at the night sky now, Myra, do you still feel that same part of you that was the 6-year-old with that wild imagination?
Yes, every day.
Every day. I love
Mhm.
that. I love that. So 6-year-old Myra falls in love with the night sky. Just tell us really briefly, what was that journey like to entering engineering school from age 6 till, fourth year and dropping out? What happened in that time in between?
A lot happened. At the age of 6, Afghanistan, which is the country of my birth, was invaded by the Russians. At the age of 10, I ended up being a refugee. I lived for 2 years as a refugee in Pakistan. Then at the age of 12, I came to the United States as a refugee. So a lot happened. There's a lot to unpack there. But it was great for me, because when I came to the United States, I read about Sally Ride, and I was like, oh, if she can go to outer space, so could I. And so the one thing that became solid for me was this dream of becoming a aeronautical engineer. That was a path. In a country like Afghanistan, the space program didn't exist. So either I chose to go to Russia or came to America. So that part was taken care of. But there was a lot that happened. And when I enrolled in engineering, like I was once waitlisted for a class. I had taken calculus 1 and 2, and I was waiting to take 3. When I talked to the professor, he said I should be home barefoot and pregnant. And ironically, I ended up taking the class with his sister-in-law.
Oh,
You know, yes.
okay. Hold on. We just, we need to pause for a moment and acknowledge that the last like 30 seconds, there's so much gravity behind what you're describing. And first of all, that's just disgusting that that ever happened to you. And I'm so sorry about that. But let me back up just a moment. And I can maybe even speak for myself, Myra. It's really, I want to say, impossible to even imagine that journey from age 6 to entering engineering school with the background I come from. And by no means will we get me into your world fully today, but can you just describe, for someone who's not even in the same stratosphere, what was the biggest thing that shifted or changed in you during that time? If you were going to say like, here's how that made me who I am today, what's that big takeaway?
It's staying connected to that dream of that 6-year-old that fell in love with the night sky, right? As I went through my journey and things got more and more difficult, I had to keep reminding of myself even when the war broke out, the night sky was my solace, right?
Mm.
As the rockets were flying, as bombs were exploding all around me, that was the one place that I could just look up to, and it gave me comfort. It gave me the strength that I needed to keep going. The hardest part was the 2 weeks that it took to flee Afghanistan on foot. It's one of the most difficult journey that you could go through, and it's fraught with dangers everywhere,
Mm.
because you're going through at night through difficult terrain. It's hard to see. If you did it during the day, it would freak out the living daylights out of you. Crawling through mountains that most mountaineers would have gear for, and yet you don't have any of that. You're just crawling through the mountain, hands and feet, and you're doing it at night. So to me, the night sky, I just kept looking at it, and it hadn't changed. While my life had changed completely drastically, and it was filled with all kinds of horrors, the night sky was still just as comforting, and it was still the same. And I could look at the stars, and they would twinkle at me, and I just felt that comfort, that belonging.
Wow. I mean, it like brings tears to my eyes, Myra, just imagining you as a child going through that. And I'm so honored that you're here with us today to tell that story, and for a reason. So let's keep this roll. Like, we could just talk about that all day. There's so much. Wow. But here we are, 4th year of engineering school then. And you get to that breaking point and you drop out. And you said you went into teaching. Is that right? And so today, here we are talking, and you are an engineering leader. So something happened. You didn't become a teacher. Tell us the rest of that story. How did you then get back into your passion for engineering?
So I did become a teacher, and I even taught for 4 years. And while it's a noble field, you can tell my passion is not there. I love the students, and I believed it as an educator. I liked the one-on-one, but I didn't like being in the classroom telling kids to take out their book, shut up, and let's do. And I also didn't like that there was very little creativity, right? They would give me the script, and they would tell me to teach to the script, because we had to teach so that the kids could pass the exam, so that the schools kept getting their funding. I didn't believe in that sort of teaching. So I had this opportunity to do an 8-week internship at Lockheed. And I treated that as my do or die moment. And I said, I'm out of 65 interns, here I am, and I hope to walk out of here with a job. And apparently that's what I did. In my final week of my 8-week internship, I had to do a presentation with all the executives in the room. So there's all these executives of Lockheed Martin sitting in the room. Every intern gets up there and they present what they had worked on, what their takeaway was. And I made my presentation, and then I sat down, and the vice president of engineering and operations put his card down on my desk after I went back to sit down, and he said, talk to me when this is over. And afterwards, I went up to him and I said, sir, you want to talk to me? And he said, it's not sir, it's Kevin. And I was like, okay, what do you want to talk about? And he said, first of all, I loved your idea. And second of all, how would you like to come work at Lockheed? And I was like, sign me up. And I want to say that the determining factor between me and 64 other interns, the reason why I got a job nobody else did, is that I was able to look at something that Lockheed already had, a product that they already had. I figured out how to make tweaks to it and created a new market for it. And I think that is what engineers are so good at, is problem solving. And when I asked him, I said, why did you select me out of 65 interns and ask me to come and work for you? He said, I have engineers that have gone to the best of schools. They can differentiate, integrate. They've done the math classes, the science classes, but they can't do what you just did. And I was very forthright with him. I said, look, I dropped out of in my 4th year, I dropped out of aeronautical engineering. Are you sure you want me to come and work for you? And he said, I pay engineers very good money, and they can't do what you just did. In 8 weeks of internship, he said, this is not a market that Lockheed Martin wants to go into, but the fact that you have that ability, that's what I'm paying you for. That's what I want you to come and work on my team. And so that's how I made my way at Lockheed, and was there for 15 years. So
I love that story, and really encouraged to remember that every moment counts. You just never know who and what is going to be that magic moment where something can completely change in the trajectory of your life. And that's awesome. So Kevin, if you're out there and you hear this, thank you for giving Myra a chance. And for those of you listening who are not Kevin, who have that opportunity to give the Myras of the future a chance, I hope you'll do so. So you're at Lockheed as a lover of the night sky, a dream place to be, doing some amazing work. What was that like for you to find yourself now in the zone of your passion and finishing engineering school and all the things that went from there? Like, what were the highlights of work that transpired those years that followed?
I considered myself incredibly blessed to be on this path, especially since I took a detour. And so every day that I showed up, it was with this understanding that, I'm here, I've been given this opportunity, this second chance, and I'm not going to blow it for any reason, right? I'm not going to say that it's always glamorous. A lot of what goes on into aerospace is what I call the wax on, wax off days. You only get one chance to launch a $2.2 billion satellite into orbit, and it better work. And so you work with incredibly gifted men and women who are so much better than you are every day. And you're never the smartest person in the room. There's always somebody that's smarter than you. I would say the things that helped me succeed was the fact that I was willing to learn from everybody. I was willing to show up and be the person that was in the lab at 2 o'clock in the morning, at 3 o'clock in the morning, go home and sleep for a couple of hours. I would shower and change, and I would turn around and come back, and I'd be in the lab at 6 o'clock again in the morning. And that takes incredible dedication, but I just feel that this was my opportunity and I wasn't going to squander it for anybody. The most impactful moment of my life was when I was at Cape Canaveral and I was watching the satellite launch. And as it flew over my head, I broke down into tears and I cried. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm being such a girl. And I turned to our quality engineer who was sitting next to me, and he too had tears in his eyes. And I said, okay, I'm not being the total girl here then. And I said to him, I said, gosh, you're crying. And he was like, so are you? And I said, it's an incredible moment. And he said, for me too. And he said, this makes my career. And I said, but you've had 38 years in this industry. And he said, yes, but this still is the most incredible moment of my life. And he said, now I can retire happily from the company. And surely the next year he retired from the company.
Wow.
But I would say that you don't get every day, you don't get to go to Cape Canaveral and watch a launch. And it takes 12 years to get to that point. And those 12 years of a lot of grunt work, but nothing beats that moment though.
Myra, it may be hard to do, but if you go back to Cape Canaveral in your mind right now and just see that rocket, what words best describe the emotion that was with you?
It's the most fulfilling moment of my life. And I've given birth to a child, but it totally beats that. Because every human being, females anyway, has the ability to give birth to a child, right? But not very many people can say I got the opportunity to launch a satellite into space. Very few of us get to do that, one in a lifetime kind of a moment. And I still to this day, I have no way of explaining to you other than that it was incredible. You feel the vibration as the rocket is launching and the satellite's on its way to orbit. You see everyone, like 3,000 people are sitting there cheering, and you're part of that, and that you made an incredible dent in what I call your little universe, and my universe was building satellites.
There's nothing better. Nothing better.
Yes.
If anybody doubts Myra's absolute passion for this space, I feel like that statement defines it. It's kind of like, water is essential to live, but diamonds are more scarce, so we value them. That moment being so incredibly scarce and special. So that's fantastic. Myra, let's then share all these years, incredibly hard work, your dedication, and this relentless spirit about not squandering this second chance that you were given. And at this point in your leadership, really doing a lot to mentor and give back to especially female engineers who want to follow in the kinds of footsteps that you have. And you've experienced the barriers, you've experienced these challenges. Can you tell us a little bit about what that journey's been like, and then how you have distilled this down to some really useful things for anybody who feels stuck on the path that you've been on?
It's fun that you mentioned the diamonds and diamonds being rare. In the diamond industry, they have their 4 C's, right? They talk about the cut and clarity and whatever the other two are. I created my own 4 Cs, and I created them with the diamond industry in mind. And there's 4 Cs that act as barrier, and it's across the world. And it particularly, it's about women, but it can be that way for men too, to some degree. And it's culture, it's confidence, it's cash, and it's childcare. Even women who make it into the field and become engineers, they still have the burden of childcare, and that could keep them out of it. So these 4 Cs to me are the barriers that keep women out of engineering, out of the workforce, out of showing up with their full potential, no matter where they are. On the flip side, I've also come up with 4 Cs that every individual can contribute to, regardless of your gender. These are 4 Cs that we can all do for one another. And that has to do with being collaborators, being confidants, being coaches, and cheerleaders. And no, I don't mean you have to wear skimpy outfits and pom-poms. I just mean that you can cheer the person on as they're making their way through these struggles. At Lockheed, I was blessed that I had cheerleaders and confidants and coaches and collaborators. My first mentor at Lockheed, I will never forget him. He drilled the 7 habits, Stephen Covey's 7 habits of successful people in my head, and especially the circle of influence. He made me read the book, reread the book, discuss it. There were days when I was like, Mr. Hayes, can we just take a break from Stephen Covey already? But I think he gave me the foundations for how I became a servant leader, and I became who I have become. It's sad that Mr. Hayes has passed away, and I don't get to tell him this, but he was one of the first people who helped me craft my 4 Cs of the coaches, the confidants, the collaborators, and the cheerleaders.
That's really powerful. So let's go back to the first 4 and help me understand what each of these words means to you. You know, I have maybe a default belief of what these are: culture, confidence, cash, and childcare. Just describe briefly how each of these manifests as a barrier, to your point, any engineer, but especially a female engineer who wants to build an impactful and successful career like you're doing. What are those really all about?
So in terms of culture, we've talked a lot about, the prevalent belief that women aren't cut out to be engineers. Culture has a lot to do with that. It's the way we raise our sons, the way we raise our daughters. It's changing, but it hasn't changed that much, especially in other countries. I think Europe and America are doing much better than countries like Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia. So when it comes to cash, and again, this doesn't apply so much to United States. I think United States is doing much better in terms of equal pay, but in other countries, there are, for example, in certain countries, a girl is married off, and the dowry is used to educate the son. And so a lot of women are losing out on getting educated and coming into the workforce because that opportunity was taken away from them. And then obviously childcare, it's a problem in the United States, but it's even more of a problem in other countries. And I think due to COVID, we've started to see how bad the problem is, because women who in the past had access to childcare all of a sudden don't have, because the daycares are, and a lot more women are leaving the workforce again. So childcare does act as a barrier. And when the burden of childcare falls on the women more than on the men, then you're going to see more women being kept out of the workforce. And finally, let's talk about confidence, right? When you have all these voices in your head, all the voices around you, they're telling you that maybe you weren't cut out for this, maybe this isn't where you want to be, maybe you should consider something else. Eventually that becomes, those voices start to help you. I mean, in my case, I was like, okay, well, forget it. Let's just drop out. And you can't be what you can't see. So if you're not seeing more women who are, this is one of the main reasons why I'm so passionate about mentoring more young women. And the thing is that I thought, okay, it happened to me, it shouldn't be happening to more women. But unfortunately, the more I did interviews as an engineering leader at schools, these are women and girls that are just graduating, and I was recruiting When I would ask them, what is one thing you're improving? I would hear imposter syndrome come up a lot. Now,
Mm.
men never told me about their imposter syndrome, but women told me a lot about that. And so I think that confidence is still something that we have a long way to work at. Both men and women have confidence issues, but I just think that the culture is definitely contributing to women's confidence in themselves as engineers.
It's interesting to me hearing you describe these, Myra, how these four C's that are barriers in a way can kind of feed off of each other as well. And the presence of one in your life can make another one more impactful, and this sort of snowballs. And I love what you said about confidence. You can't be what you can't see. I'm curious for you, when was the moment that you actually saw that something else was possible, something more was possible for Myra?
It's always been a battle for me, and it's been a battle because there's these voices in my head that I picked up from around me, that tell me I'm not good enough, and then there's voices that I've had to replace them with someone like Mr. Hayes, who said, you got this, you belong in a bigger stage. When I first started at Lockheed, I have to say, my confidence was tanked. I was like, there's so much smarter people around me. How could I possibly keep this career here? What helped was that someone like Mr. Hayes said, you got this. And this is why I came up with my other four C's, right? Because the confidants, the coaches, the cheerleaders, the collaborators eventually helped me to see myself. It's what Amy Cuddy talks about in her book and in her talk. You fake it till you become it. I guess I faked it enough till I became it. But the journey was, so I had the pleasure of meeting Anusha Ansari, who's the first Iranian woman to use her own money to go to outer space. She became a cosmonaut. And when I met her, and she described that dream of being a child and looking at the night sky and falling in love with it, I realized, okay, I'm not alone. Like there's
Yes.
other, and I met her as an adult. I never knew that there were, because do Iranian women become cosmonauts and astronauts? Do Afghan women? That role model never existed. I had to picture myself as Sally Ride or as Mae Jameson, because those were the women that I had seen. And to me, if they had overcome it, then I could have overcome it. But it's important to, like, I always talk about Anusha Ansari wherever I go, because to me, I think what she did is incredible, to be able to
Absolutely.
go do that. And let's be honest, there's sacrifices that she had to make. There were sacrifices that I had to make, but each one of them I was willing to make them. She
Yes.
was willing to make them, because this dream was bigger than us. And to me, I still believe that there are other little girls out there that are dreaming about that night sky and want to be an astronaut, and I want them to know that it's possible. So I didn't become an astronaut, but I sent stuff into outer space, and I think that's good enough for me.
That's an amazing accomplishment, no question. It's interesting, Myra, and I agree with you anecdotally what I see with the engineering leaders who I coach and the literature and everything, that this is a more prevalent challenge, confidence, for women than for men, in how it manifests at least. But I remember vividly facing the decision to go into coaching full time and start my business versus continue in my engineering career at Whirlpool, and where I was having success, and that was the easy path. And I had that moment of, who am I to do this, and asking some of those same questions. And I think it's something we all face. And I had my own version of a Mr. Hayes, someone who came along and said, look, I've been coaching for decades, and look at my clients, and these people are much smarter than me. It's not about me being better than them at what they do. It's about what am I going to bring, and just changed my whole paradigm around why moving into this would be right in line with my own passion and heart and capabilities. But even as good of an engineer and coach as I was, I faced that same moment of like, wow, can I really step into an environment like a Google or an Amazon when I'm this Rust Belt mechanical engineer turned coach? Fortunately, the answer is absolutely yes. But that role model and that ability to see it was huge in my life as well. Let's go back to the positive side then. These other four C's, whether it's you facing the barriers, and you need to seek these things out to break through. Or maybe, this is for the engineer and the leader listening who's not dealing with it themselves, but you can become this to the leader who needs your help. Tell us about these other 4 C's and how they help with the breakthrough. What is it about them that negates some of the effects of the barriers?
Well, we can start with the cheerleaders, right? The cheerleaders help you get rid of those nasty voices in your head that you've picked up along the way. And when the voices in your head is saying, who are you to do this? And you're not good enough. Then the cheerleaders are saying, you got this. I have confidence in you. With Mr. Hayes, who said you belong in a bigger stage, I'd love to see you there. Even if I'm not alive, just know that I will be watching you and supporting you from wherever that is.
Awesome.
Till this day, I take that with me. And before I every talk, I believe that Mr. Hayes is there. He's watching from wherever he is. And so to me, when the confidence is tanking, the cheerleaders step in. When you have people that you can confide in, people that you can say to, hey, I'm really struggling with seeing myself, and I'm about to delve into this really big problem, and I really don't know that if I can do it. Again, your cheerleaders, your confidants, these are the people who will say, you've got this, I have faith in you, and if you falter, you're always welcome to come talk to me. I will get you through this. And again, for me, Mr. Hayes was all 4 of those things, right? He coached me. He's the one who made me, he drilled Stephen Covey in my head. And he was like, you have what it takes. You just need that push. And I'm here to give you that push. And, I'll never forget, because he said, look, I'm a bit of an oddball, and seems like you are too, and the universe has thrown us together. So let's make the best of all of this. And he knew he was retiring, and he was not willing to take anybody on as a mentee, but he said, somehow universe wants me to mentor you. So I'm going to do it for the short time that I'm at Lockheed, and we'll visit whatever happens. And I believe he was sent to set the foundation, right? And then once he set the foundations, others stepped in and helped me build the house. And I'm grateful then to the incredible mentors who was all of those things for me, right? They were my cheerleaders in my moments when I was down and now that I was doubting myself. They were my confidants. The way I met Mr. Hayes is I actually walked into his office and said the most incredibly stupid thing you could possibly say. I walked into his office and I closed the door and I said, Mr. Hayes, you're Black. And he was like, thanks for noting the obvious. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm an African American. He was like, no, Black's fine. What's going on? And I was having an incredibly challenging time with someone. And I said, I feel like I'm going crazy, Mr. Hayes. Can I just, I offloaded. And he was like, okay, I can see why. And I now your first statement makes sense. And thankfully he didn't chastise
Wow.
me for that. And
What a moment. Mr. Hayes, you're Black. You're right. I cannot recommend that anybody open a conversation that way, but that's such a beautiful, beautiful story. Wow. Well, Myra, I'm so encouraged by this. And one thing that stands out to me about your second set of 4 C's, being a collaborator, a confidant, a coach, and a cheerleader, is that these are not technical skill sets or things you get out of a textbook or even an important strategy around how to navigate politics in the office. It's all about the human to human connection and a real relationship with someone who needs it, and having that servant, selfless leadership to just say, I can be that for you with no expectation of anything in return. I think that's really powerful. And maybe as was one more question, if somebody does not have that person or persons in their life right now, they don't have a Mr. Hayes, what would you recommend someone's first step be if they need that help?
I don't know if you've ever heard of the Heidi Howard's case study. It's an interesting case study about bias towards women and gender. And it was the first one that it was done by Harvard, and then it was replicated by Stanford and other business schools. But basically what they did is, Heidi Roizen is an actual human being. I've met her. She's amazing. She was a woman who started her own company, sold it to Apple. She became an executive at Apple. She's currently a venture capitalist and invests in companies like SpaceX and others. So what they did is they took Heidi Roizen's resume and they showed it to 250 students in the graduate business school. And when the name was Heidi, it was 92% negative. And when the name was Howard, it was 89% positive. And so Heidi was a ball buster. Her credentials weren't real. You name it, it was very negative. But when it was Howard, everybody accepted it. And everybody was like, oh, Howard is this personable guy, and he's hardworking, and he's, and so when I had the opportunity to meet Heidi, I asked her what it was like to be in this incredibly tough environment as a woman, and what did she do to seek out people. And she said she believes in this concept of Fab Five. And Fab Five is 5 people that she has never gone to school with, that she's never worked with, but those are people that she has met professionally in some capacity or another. And she has befriended them, built a solid friendship with them, and they act as those confidants, coaches, collaborators, cheerleaders for her.
Wow.
And I would say that, it's important that we all surround ourselves with 5 people that we have never gone to school with. We were not neighbors. They don't know us since those days when we were in kindergarten. And we were eating bugs, but people who are professionals that we have met, but we've never worked with. And that's the incredible important thing to remember, is these are not people you've worked with. These are people that you've met professionally in some society or some conference or somewhere, that you befriend, that you keep in touch with, that you're there for them and they're there for you, and that you keep them close by you. And that Fab Five is supposed to help you get unstuck.
Really cool.
Wherever you're stuck.
I love that. A great actionable thing for everyone to take away. If you don't have that, to go be proactive and start seeking out those relationships. Go to the conference, connect with someone on LinkedIn, and ask them to be a part of your Fab Five. I think that's amazing. Myra, there's so much we could cover. Thank you again for being so courageous and sharing your story. And I know just tremendous value for every engineering leader listening to this. But to wrap up, I really believe great engineering has in common with great coaching and great leadership that questions lead and the answers follow. And so for that engineering leader who's been listening to this conversation, who wants to have a big impact and wants to enjoy and be happy and fulfilled along the way, what is the best question that you would lead them with today?
I always ask everybody this question, because with every person that I talk to, the answer is different. And it's different because of the place that they're at. And the more they go up at the level, the more sophisticated the problem becomes, and the more they have to face those challenges. But I always ask every person that I meet this question, and I ask them this question because I think it's incredibly insightful, and that is, what keeps you up at night? When I interview people, it's always a question that I ask. It's a question that even if I'm not asking an interview, I still offer the answer to. Because to me, I think when you're working together, you're looking for 2 things. You're looking for confidence and you're looking for resilience. And I've demonstrated that I've definitely had confidence issues in the past, but I've also demonstrated that I've had resilience, and both of these things define me. I once had somebody tell me that I had Hitler-Napoleon complex. And I had to take a step back and say, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you're a short person and you have all this ambition. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay. And to me, I've unapologetically been ambitious about my dreams, my vision, and I've gone after them despite the fact that everybody around me said, you're not cut out for this. It's important to remember that, especially in moments when it's hard and you just want to give up. Remember that what keeps you up at night is your place where you need to be, and it's universe trying to tease out that it wants you to play bigger. So ask yourself that question, what is keeping me up at night? If you have a small child, and know that that's going to go away, but what professional personal thing is keeping you up at night? And if you can answer that for yourself, I think you'll be in a much better place.
Wow. Cool question. What keeps you up at night? I hope everyone will go take an honest look at what Myra's talking about here. Myra, I can't thank you enough for making time for us. And if someone wants to, reach out and connect with you, or just follow your story and success from here, where's the best place that someone could do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, so Myra Nawabi is the best way to connect with me. Do send me a message so I know you're not a robot. Because I've worked in aerospace industry, people that work in the aerospace industry is targeted a lot by the Chinese and the Russians. So if you're from China or Russia and you want to connect with me, that's not to say I don't want to connect with you. I just need to know that you're a human being and not some entity with malicious intent. So a line that says, hey, I heard your podcast or saw you at some place is perfectly fine. And I'm happy to connect with people. I'm happy to be a sounding board. We talked about the 4 C's of coaches, confidants, collaborators, and cheerleaders. The more you do that for others, the more people will reciprocate. And so,
yes.
So I've done that for others. Apparently others reciprocated in kind. I'm always grateful. And to anybody who's struggling, I'm willing to be that sounding board.
What an amazing opportunity. So make sure you let Myra know that you heard her on the Happy Engineer podcast, so she'll know you're a human. And Myra, thank you again so much for just the tremendous heart and vision that you bring to this conversation. And I look forward so much to watching your success from here. Thanks again.